Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Product in LA podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Cole, and this is an opportunity to shine the spotlight on some of the exceptional technology leaders we have as part of the LA community in an unedited, one-take organic conversation. And I'm excited to speak with Sarah Grifferty today. Thanks for coming down in the studio, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. But first, a word from our sponsors. Product in LA is brought to you by Uruit. Do you need help completing your roadmap items? Uruit is a digital product development agency with over 15 years of experience helping companies build web and mobile apps by embedding directly into their Scrum teams. Uruit's expert full-stack software developers provide quality code to help you get the job done. If you need React or Angular front-end devs, or perhaps help with Node.js, .NET, or Python development, DevOps, or even product or design to help solidify requirements, they're ready to help you close out roadmap items and actually release to customers. Learn more at uruit.com. That's URUIT.com. We're also brought to you by the Product Managers Association Los Angeles, available at pma.la. They are the largest professional organization for product and designers in LA. With more than 3,000 members from over 500 companies, they host monthly meetups, organize the Product Leader Council, where CPOs and heads of product connect in small 6 to 8 member pods, and have a mentorship program where they connect working product managers with students from underrepresented groups to build a better, more diverse next gen. To learn more about PMA, go to pma.la. To learn more about the mentorship program, go to pma.la/mentorship. Our guest today is Sarah Grifferty. She is the CEO and founder of Loose Ends. Her past roles have included Senior Investment Research Associate for Private Equity and Venture Capital Data Analytics at Cambridge Associates. And one interesting fact you might learn from her by going to her LinkedIn page is she just came off the stage for a LA TechWeek event dedicated to DeathTech. Thank you for joining us fresh off of performing. We're speaking at LA TechWeek and dedicated to DeathTech. I believe it was the only event dedicated to it.
Yes, it is. This year and last year too. So first and only event.
All right. Hopefully one of many to come, which I guess is a little weird given that it's DeathTech. But I guess we could get into that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
I guess I'd love to learn about your journey into technology. Did you expect to find yourself in tech or in the DeathTech field? How did you get here?
Definitely did not expect it. No.
Okay.
I would say it's been both a long and a short road to get here. But it really started probably about, I guess, 12 years ago now. I lost my dad when I was 19.
Okay.
And, after that was kind of catapulted into everything with the state administration and understanding what happens after someone dies.
I'm not going to ask your age, but you're not old. So
no,
I must have been young when that happened.
Yes. I was 19 years old when he died.
Wow.
And then at the same time, my mom was diagnosed with 2 forms of cancer. Lucky double.
Okay.
And unfortunately she also died. And that was about 3.5 years after my dad. So after her death, I was fully catapulted. If I got the mini catapult before, I guess.
Okay.
With her, it was full and became an executor of her estate. And really,
an executor of estate. Can you just describe what the responsibilities are? Who is that, and what do they do?
Yeah. So executor is going to be named by, hopefully named by someone in advance. So my mom named my older brother and I as co-executors on her estate.
Okay.
So that when she died, we would essentially be the ones to do all of the legal, financial, logistical pieces. So, a lot of people, you'll designate an executor. You might also have a different person that could be, maybe in charge of dependents, and legally care for your dependents. Okay. So there's a couple different roles, but we were executors.
Wow. And so being thrust into that responsibility, I mean, at a young age, I know when I was in my early 20s, you know, things that weren't even on my radar were, you know, estate management. How did that impact, you know, where you found yourself going? I guess looking back now, like how did that impact you in terms of, you know, the journey from the career path? I imagine there's quite a huge emotional journey that was involved as well in that situation. But how did that impact you across the board?
Yeah. I mean, I think, uh, while I was going through it, I was not at all thinking about starting a business.
Okay.
So, kudos, I guess, maybe to anyone who can do that. I would not have had, I don't think, the mental or the emotional bandwidth to even think about putting myself into another terrifying situation. Being in that situation was terrifying enough.
Yeah.
But I think it was, once you're kind of out of the epicenter, right? Maybe the first year, maybe the first 15 months can be pretty heavy as far as all the things that you have to do after someone dies, whether it's their accounts or managing and figuring out property. Of course, like early on funeral arrangements and that sort of thing. But I would say it was a few years after, I was just thinking, well, could I be an entrepreneur? Could I be a founder? Is there something that I've been through that has been so challenging and so eye-opening? And there was nothing else in my head at this time. It was just, why has this been so challenging? And for years, for my family, it was difficult. So for me, it was about going through it and being deeply in it while I was in it, and then coming out of it and looking back and thinking, well, what the heck? This is terrible. And there are no solutions.
And what aspects of it were you finding to be so terrible?
I think,
and I mean, imagine there's a million
yeah,
things that were terrible throughout that process. Like what was a trigger that you're saying, hey, this specific thing is terrible?
I think for me, it was, there's a lot of things that are going to happen, that are going to come after someone dies. There's probably a funeral, and that's probably going to be tough. That there are legal things you have to do that might be challenging.
Okay.
I think for me, what stayed with me the longest were all of these like smaller things that seemed so inconsequential, but were so challenging to do. So, for instance, I did not know that calling Hawaiian Airlines on the phone to try to cancel a flight ticket would be something that would bring me to my knees. And it did. It was so challenging. And I think it was those things in particular, those smaller things that we had to do, that were just so unnecessarily difficult, that were the most pronounced in my head.
Oh, interesting. So it's like when you're walking into it, you're already in like a pretty rough space because you've just lost your loved ones, and there's a couple big pillars that you're like, okay, I see things in my future. We have a house. All right, I guess it's on me now to figure out how to close that. And I guess put a pin in that. Like, I mean, how do you even know how to do these things? It sounds like that's going to be a challenge in itself. If you're kind of in the wilderness and this is the first time you're doing these things, especially if you're young, that's a huge challenge. But then on top of it, you're saying this smaller thing. So this trip to Hawaii, I imagine it was booked, it was pre-booked, and you had to go about, canceling because they're no longer able to take that trip.
Yep.
Oh.
And I think that's the case, for so many people, no matter, death, I think, is largely unexpected, even when we expect it. It's still timing wise unknown. So you're always going to have things like that, travel plans that were put in motion, or, things that you've booked and paid for that you have to now kind of figure out. So it was all of those, I think, smaller things. We had one issue with insurance being commingled, and my driver's license, I think, got suspended. So there were so many things just like that nothing is going to prepare you for, and nothing it was so hard, I think, to just keep encountering those small things along the way.
So your license got suspended?
Yes, in New York State. Yes.
So did you have to get around by Uber to?
I at that time had lived in another state, but my New York license was still active, and because of some commingled car insurance issues and canceling one and then selling a car, and it all got messed up. And I think still currently my license is probably suspended in New York State.
Wow, stay out of New York.
So. Yeah, exactly.
So you find yourself, at these challenges that you didn't expect. And then where does journey, with tech go from there?
Yeah, I think it was really just that at the time, and this would have been in, 2015, 2016, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was Googling what to do and how to do it and all of this. And there just weren't very many solutions. And I think for me, it made very little sense because there was so much of our lives, even then, that was tech enabled, supported by technology or made easier or just more convenient, at the very least, a repository of information. And that just did not exist at that time. There were companies, we know now that were starting then and were really early. But I think at large, there was still, you go to a probate attorney and then maybe talk to an accountant, and that's what you do. There was very little innovation, and it just seemed silly because it was something that was largely being led by me and my brothers. We were in the driver's seat, so to speak, as far as what needed to happen.
Right.
And that felt unsettling. We wanted, I think, more answers, and it just seemed like there were so many opportunities to bring the whole industry forward into just the 21st century, as far as being able to communicate across different accounts and being able to close things easier and access information, but just didn't exist then. And that for me was, I think, the big point where I thought maybe I'll just make something.
What's the space look like? Death tech, is that even the right term for it?
Definitely. I think there's a few floating around. So if we think about sort of the whole age tech market can sometimes overlap with end of life, and what that looks like. But yeah, I think death tech is the right term for it.
And how big is the space? Just trying to get a sense, especially for folks who are listening who may not have ever thought of death tech, have never heard of the word death tech. Could give a sense of maybe the opportunity size, if that's even the right word to be using here.
Yeah.
In this like space of death and mourning. But what's it look like in the death tech world?
Yeah, there are different ways that you can look at it. So one number that we can consider is the revenues generated in the death care services market. Okay. Is $68 billion. And that was
68 billion.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is just for funerals, cremation, burials, cemeteries, that sort of thing. So when we think about death, of course, the funeral takes place so relatively soon after a loss.
Right.
And then there is, still so much that you're doing with the estate administration process. So that is just really a small fraction of the whole process that you might encounter after. And there's not great numbers for that after loss service.
And at the Death Tech panel for LA Tech Week, it came up. You correct me if the numbers are off here, but it's the average person spends 570 hours completing an estate. So this is, and I believe that's on average over the span of 16 months. So if you lose someone, you're an executive of their will. you have these obligations that come on top of your everyday life, whatever it is at that time. And so you're doing that for 570 hours and for the next 16 months of your life while you're in the grieving process before you're not even emotional closure. It's like literally just like logistical closure.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's, it's kind of it's probably front loaded. So the first 3 months will be a lot of the hours, the first 6 months, the most of them, let's say. But then these things continue to carry, for months and often for years, that there are still things left to do and to manage. But it is a lot of time devoted to that, estate administration process. And with that, there's so many people need support throughout it.
And I guess today, what's the current state? Like, where are they getting this support? Like, are folks still bushwhacking it through the process? Like, it sounds like, you and your brother were forced to do, just Googling your way through.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you would Google, like what to do when someone dies. Like,
yes, that is exactly.
It's a challenging topic. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to make light of it. There's the guilt of talking about DeathTech. But yeah, like, so what are those folks? What are they doing?
I mean, I think people are turning to Google. We definitely know that. I think all of the traditional channels continue to stand. So people work with an estate attorney or a probate attorney.
Okay.
And then they kind of go from there. Where they can't or don't have specific answers, people are left Googling or asking friends and family. This is not an area where there is, there's so much more now online than even when I was looking and Googling those exact same things. There's more, I think, how-tos and articles and information for how to go through things. But it's a collection. It's not like there's just a one-stop shop for everything that you need.
Yeah, it's not like there's not like the knot for like
no.
for wedding. Like the knot is a site where many people use to help organize their weddings and get ideas for their weddings. And I believe there's services that you can use based off of it. But there's not a knot for. It's not just we're not just talking the funeral, and it sounds like the funeral is its own challenge, but that does seem like it's a fleeting moment. But this is the marathon, I guess, of closing accounts. I guess what does it look like to try to close an account too? So, and I know how easy it is to open an account. I feel like I get requests every day, almost even time I open up one of my financial accounting apps. It gives me like a 1 or 2 click way to open my new account. What does it look like on the other side of that, especially when it's not you closing the account? So when you're trying to close someone else's account, I imagine that's one of the pain points that's in this technology age when we're going paperless, and where it's not like you enter the house after death and you kind of just find their filing cabinet like, oh, here's all the accounts information. It seems like it's a challenge today, and as we go continue to walk down this more and more green paperless path, it feels like it may present more challenges. Is that how does that fit with what you're seeing and what you see in the near future for this area?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely creates challenges, right? Like we have this technology that makes things easier in life, but often makes it harder in death. So just to go through kind of like the overview, I suppose, of the process, it's really companies, we have all these accounts, right, in our life. 5 financial accounts, 3 credit cards, 5 utility accounts, on average 150 online accounts, kind of mishmash of different things.
Right.
But really all these companies that you go to where you hold these accounts, they need 3 things. They need to authenticate that the death has happened.
Okay.
and that you are the right person to talk to. So you as executor can make these decisions and handle this account.
Okay.
So that's the first, is authenticate. Then they need to just assess what is your account that you're coming to close or transfer or change in some way. What is that account? What is the status of it? Is there anything else? And then they need to take action. So they either work with you to transfer funds or remove a name off of an account, any number of things. And it's really those three things that is consistent across the board, no matter where you're going to close an account. But if you're doing that process, right now from the kind of individual end, you're taking a paper death certificate. You are notifying, let's say, a bank.
A paper death certificate.
Yes, a paper death certificate that you have to pay $20 for. It'll vary by county, but I think the kind of average rate in California is $20. And we tell people now you need 15 to 20 of those, because
every account
you need them for critical, let's call it critical accounts. So almost every bank account will want an original copy.
Okay.
That's the one that has the seal, and if you photocopy it, it'll have a watermark on it so people know that it's a copy.
Okay.
So you need an original copy, and those are the ones that cost $20. But when you go, you'll, come in hand with your paper death certificate. Maybe you'll go to the physical branch, or you'll call their executor services on the phone. You'll say, death has happened. I would like to take this said action on this account. This is the information I have. What do you need from me? And then they will initiate, for most financial institutions, like a case number, and then work with you until you get it closed. But it really varies across the board, which is why it's such a confusing and extremely time-consuming thing to have to do. Not only are you in almost all cases calling these companies and waiting on hold, but you have to input all the same information again.
Oh no.
You have to, if they have their own form online, you're inputting your information there again. It's just an extremely repetitive process, and it's time-consuming and frustrating for anyone who's doing it.
That reminds me of a conversation I just had with Thor Clark on the last episode. We were talking about health tech and having to go to doctors' offices where you are, still handed today a clipboard with pieces of paper where you fill out basically the same information every single time, every person you go to. And that's rough enough, but it's for you going to see a doctor or going to go to a doctor for a kid or an elder. I can't imagine sitting there and needing to fill out the same form over and over again to close out an account when you're already, grieving and mourning a person, to have these additional menial tasks.
Yeah. And you're confronted every, deceased's name. That's how it's always listed. That
it's like punching you in the face every single time.
Yeah. You absolutely feel like the people or the person that you've lost is just reduced to a bunch of paperwork. It feels like you have no capacity or time to think about them in a different way. They're just deceased on this form, which is awful.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense that, as a person, who's trying to figure out, what they should be, what challenges they see around them, having been faced with it as you have it. Yeah, it's one of those things you probably weren't as a little girl growing up thinking like, I want to get into DeathTech. But it makes so much sense, and it sounds like it's still a relatively new opportunity. Talking to me about DeathTech, it doesn't come up as often as FinTech or health tech.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of why you think that is, and do you think things will change in the near future?
Yeah, I think more people are talking about it. It's still not, like you said, it's not going to be as big as fintech or some of these other things, but I think the tides are moving towards people being interested in it, which is kind of where you have to start. But I think at the kind of at a broader level, we're coming into, particularly in the US, such a time where we're going to need to confront it even more than we do now. So we have a super aging society in the US. Deaths are set to surpass births by 2043.
Okay.
We also have, with that increase in death, we have a huge asset transfer that's coming, really an asset kind of wave that's coming down with 16 trillion, I think, in the next decade.
16 trillion.
16 trillion. Yes, exactly. Expected to pass hands in the next decade. And another 68 trillion in the decade following that. So a huge asset transfer happening. And, it's a extremely antiquated industry. Like we just talked about, there's paper death certificates. You're calling on the phone to handle things. You're dealing with local funeral homes. You don't have a lot of, or there's more options now, but most people still see there's kind of one avenue. So where we're headed is just, we're going to be confronting death more across, I guess, the whole societal level. And there's all of this money changing hands. And people need help with it. People need help transferring and actually going through the processes to, obtain that inheritance.
Oh, okay. I think we've talked about this as a society for a long time, about the boomers and how, when they pass, it's a large number of them. That's why they're called the baby boomers, right? So this idea that it's something that maybe hasn't hit us yet, but there's like a wave or a tsunami coming of challenges for the Gen X, millennials, Gen Z folks who are now in a place where they will be put in the driver's seat. They will be forced to navigate these waters they've never faced before. And so, thank you for being in this space and for trying to help. Don't even say they, us, me, we, everyone, right? So it's going to come to me as well, as there's, everything, there's no certainties of life but death and taxes, right? So thank you for being a part of this space and for doing it in the LA ecosystem. Grounding this back into LA. What is the most LA thing that's happened to you? And I guess it is a challenging transition, and I think that comes with DeathTech, the guilt and of talking about these opportunities that are very much immersed in mourning and grief. I guess first of all, how do you handle that? How do you handle the ability to juggle both excitement for a business that you're building in a technology that is surrounded by, some taboo, but also grief and mourning and death?
Yeah, I think so. I heard, maybe this was on a TED Talk years ago, but you don't necessarily have to have passion for an idea. I think that gets hit really hard with entrepreneurs. You have to be passionate, and if you don't have your passion, you'll never make it. You can never create a company. It's pretty hard to be passionate about death. And when you say that, you might get some interesting looks. But I have found that I am endlessly frustrated, borderline angry, and curious. I think it's just continues to baffle me, with every person I talk to that's been through it, thinking back on my own experiences, talking to somebody who's going through it now. Every time I just feel overwhelmed by how antiquated the whole system is and how much people need and want for a solution. And that is really what keeps me in the whole thing. It's not
Mm.
it would be too glib to say that I was just passionate about this and I wanted something, but I know that there has to be a solution, and
Yeah.
I think for me it's just taking my best shot at it.
Oh, and the personal experience, having been there, having lived through it yourself, I imagine that's helpful and motivation for you to get through it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I guess transitioning to something lighter, transitioning to product in LA. What's the most LA thing that's happened to you?
So this was I guess before I officially lived here.
Okay.
I was visiting my brothers here who lived in LA, and we walked into a coffee shop, and there was Jerry Seinfeld
Oh, whoa.
filming comedians in cars getting coffee in the
Oh,
coffee shop that we were in. So that was probably
that's
the
awesome.
most LA thing. Yeah.
You just happened to be in town
Just
checking it out.
happened to walk in. Yep.
I love that show. That's great. I've always wondered like what
Yeah.
happens if are you just one of those folks in the background here? Just
Yep,
like
that was me. Yeah.
that's awesome. That's a great one. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your story, sharing not your passion, but
Yeah.
what you've been working on, and understanding the value in fixing a space that is technologically broken and still is right now. Yeah. Again, what's the company one more time?
It's loose ends.
Loose Ends. Okay. So if you want to learn more about Sarah and Loose Ends, what she's working on, go find her, go look her up. But thank you again for being here, Sarah. Also like to thank our sponsors. It's the Product Managers Association Los Angeles, available at pma.la, as well as Uruit, available at uruit.com. I'd like to thank you all for listening. And if you enjoy what you're hearing, please hit the subscribe button. It helps with reach and getting other folks to learn more about product in LA. And we'll catch you next time on Product in LA.